Good evening, everyone. Lovely to be here with you again. I see only familiar faces, although I know we have a couple of extra new people with us coming in. I haven't come in yet. But I'm glad that you were able to make it this evening. So, a little bit of housekeeping. What do I normally announce for housekeeping? I'll give you a reminder to do what? Would you kindly just remember to switch off your mobile phones or put it on silent, as we are recording as well. Hi, Amy. I think you all know where the bathrooms are. We will also be having some refreshments again between the two presentations this evening. And as our custom is, can I invite you to bow your heads with me for a word of prayer? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just want to acknowledge you and thank you for the day's blessings, Lord. It was a beautiful day today. And we thank you for bringing us here safely. We ask you to be with those that may still be coming. And Father, that you would give us discerning minds, Lord, as we consider the content of Dr. Ramirez's presentations this evening. And give us discerning minds to know your utmost love and care for each one of us. And give us faith, Lord, to build upon the things that we receive here tonight. Please be with Dr. Ramirez as he leads out. Again, Father, and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Fix these colors. Well, good evening. This photo I took when I was running in Pennsylvania, and I stopped by to take a picture of the sunflowers, and this grasshopper, I didn't see it, that it was there. I just took the picture. It came out just perfectly there, the grasshopper there in the picture. A few years ago, I was in Finland with my family. I went to do some seminars there. So, of course, if you go to Finland, you have to go to the sauna bath. And it was in the winter. Look at what we did. This is outside of the sauna bath. You can see the snow there in the ground. There's my daughter. And there's my other daughter. That lake is about to be frozen. It's like 2 degrees Celsius. And there's my wife. And that's me. Boom. It actually feels very good to do this. If you've never done it, for the people in Finland, this is a definition of fun. This is something fun. This is something that they enjoy doing. Let me start tonight's presentation with the story of my friend Jorge. Jorge, I grew up with him. He's a couple of years younger than him. And Jorge had a couple of years ago his third heart attack, and this time he didn't survive it. And that's exactly the problem with what we're going to be talking about tonight. That's why I'm very happy you guys are here, because you're going to learn how to prevent this. We can prevent most of those heart attacks if we understand where the problem comes from and what changes we need to do. So it was very sad to lose Jorge, and at the same time, we need to understand that the choices that we are making have consequences, Even if we don't like it, that's just the way that life works. And you can see worldwide how common this problem is. Can you see that? Is it something very rare? No, it's devastating lives literally all over the world. And even in Africa, where you don't necessarily see it there as number one, this is the number one cause of death. That's what you're seeing in the screen. As I tell people when I go to Africa, Africa is like two countries in one. So you have people that have quite a bit of resources, and you have people that lack resources. Then you mix them. And that's why when you see the numbers and the trends and so forth, things are a little bit confusing. But even in Africa, heart disease is also one of the top reasons why people end up living less. And here you can see the statistics from America, how this heart disease is number one above anything else. Same story in Australia. Now, in this particular study, this is a study that was published on the Journal of the American Medical Association. They were not only showing you what is the number one cause, but what is causing it. So notice there that tobacco was a big factor that was triggering heart disease. Poor diet and inactivity was the second factor that they identify, and alcohol drinking. So this is exactly what I was mentioning to you. Notice how many of those heart attacks happen because tobacco, poor diet, inactivity, and alcohol. So here comes the question. Can you stop smoking? Yes or no? Yes, may not necessarily be the most easy thing to do, but it's possible to overcome smoking. Can you change your diet and start an exercise program? Is that possible? Yes, it's possible. Can you stop drinking alcohol? Is that possible? Yes, so as you can see, these are things that we can work on, that we can modify. We're going to go a little bit more ahead with more detail about that diet. So, as you can see in this paper from JAMA, tobacco, diet and inactivity, alcohol, and microbes. But if you do the mathematics, it's about, those two first ones, those are a big issue regarding our health. In other words, 90% of these diseases you saw on the screen are directly related on how we live. So when you analyze how liquids flow on a tube, if you remember your physics when you were in the high school type of age, you're going to see that if you have this tube in which fluids are flowing, that will be the equivalent analogous to your blood vessels and blood that is circulating there. If you block this by 10%, you don't necessarily block the flow by 10%. It's actually a little bit of an exponential type of thing. So 10% blockage blocks more than 10% of the blood flow that is cruising around there. So that means I need to be careful with my blood vessels because small closures have big implications. Notice this very interesting study. This is the Journal of the American Cardiology Society. And in this study, they were having young people that died of some sort of violent death, and they did autopsy. When you do an autopsy, you open the person and check every detail on their body. And notice what they found out among young people. These are young people, the ages between 20 to 32 years old. Okay, very young people. So when they checked those arteries, they found out that 78% of them, of those young people, already had heart disease. So if you live in Australia and you're living the way the average Australian lives, it's probably some correlationship there between this and what's happening inside. In fact, there was 50% narrowing in 21% of them, and there was 75% some spots that became that blocked in 9% of them. Is that good news or bad news? That's bad news. So the thing of it is that this is not just a unique study here and there. Other studies, such as the veterans that died during the wars of Korea and Vietnam, many of those young soldiers, when they went ahead and did autopsies, they actually found similar numbers to this. Notice here, and this is a journal of pediatrics, notice what it says there. Fatty streak is the very, very beginnings of atherosclerosis. So, by the age of 10, in the Western world, most young people already have the beginnings of heart disease. And this is a big deal because it means that these heart attacks and so forth can show up earlier and earlier. This is what I was telling you that happened with my friend. See, what happened to him is not something that started last year and then that's why he ended up with a heart attack the next year. These are years and years of blockage that by the time he got to his early 40s, that's when this heart attack happened to him, as a result of that. So here, another paper here about that atherosclerosis among young people. So the issue is that depending where this problem happens is what we call the problem. So if it's a blockage at the level of the heart, they would call that a heart attack. If it's a blockage at the level of the brain, that's what we call a stroke. If there's not enough blood flow arriving to your legs, well, you can have a gangrene. The tissue starts dying and so forth. And this is also something extremely dangerous, the aneurysm. I've seen many people actually perish out of this. So the main artery of your body comes out of your heart and then it sends blood to all the lower extremities. That big artery is called the aorta. So when the aorta starts building up atherosclerosis, it starts to weaken the walls of the artery and you start getting this growth here of the blood vessel, and this thing can break and you literally bleed to death within minutes, because unless you were in the ER with the surgeon ready there to stop this, by the time the person arrives to the ER, it's too late, and the person ends up dying of that. Let's play a little bit there, the doctor. Let's see who is our patient here. Anybody? Who is this one? A mummy from Egypt. Now, who were the mummies? The average person of Egypt? No, it was the cream of the society, isn't it? The big business person, the priest, the king, the government officials, and so forth. So let's make some diagnosis here among these Egyptians. Let's see what we found out. What problem this one had? Obesity. In Spanish, we call the little tires, we call them those. The front, you can actually visualize that. What problem this one had? Cavities. What problem this one had? Very common cause of surgery here in Australia. Anyone? gallbladder stones. Okay? Very, very common cause of surgery. What problem this one had? Cancer. And notice this one. Here, there's this people pulling up the arteries full of atherosclerosis. They're pulling that from the blood vessels. You know? So this is something that was common back then. So one of the problems we have today is that we are living like kings and queens. For example, when I was growing up, we had birthday cake, you know? But there's some people that every day is birthday. They have cake every day. You know? So you cannot live like queens and kings and not expect the diseases of the kings and queens, you know. Beware of that. This is something I tell my patients, you know. Many times people come to me and say, no, but doctor, where I come from, people eat meat every day. And blah. That's not necessarily true. The rich people, where you come from, that's the way they eat. Yes or no? But the average person, in fact, the person that lacks resources, I can assure you they don't eat like that. You know? Because usually those items tend to be, you know, more expensive and so forth. So many of us, you know, grew up in that type of thing. We're seeing, oh, look at that, what the rich people eat, you know. Now, we move here to Australia, where now we can actually afford the food of the rich people, yes or no? It's more accessible, and then you start eating what in your home country used to be a once-in-a-while type of thing. It becomes more of the everyday type of fare, and we get in trouble as a result of that. So this is the way that it works. So you have here you have the blood vessels. So as I mentioned to you, as these blood vessels start to clog in, when there's a complete blockage, depending where that happens is the end result. If this happens at the level of the heart, I mentioned to you, this is what we call a heart attack. And if this happens at the level of the brain, this is going to be a stroke. Now you can do this. Look at what you can do. You can open the heart. You can expose the heart. You can find the arteries that bring the blood, and look at the junk that is coming out of these blood vessels. That is what I'm talking to you about. That is this atherosclerosis that end up shortening your life. Notice here the statistics from Australia. Nearly 1 in 5 Australians have cardiovascular disease. And this is the cardiovascular disease that you know they have it. You know, many times it's there, but you don't know it's there. And 50,000 Australians have reported heart attacks, cardiovascular disease. 30% of all the deaths in Australia happen to be cardiovascular disease related. And coronary heart disease is the top cause of death for males. And it's interesting because if you notice, as we're going to be learning, dementia happens to be also a very important cause of problem. And many dementias, not all of them, many dementias, the origin of that happens to be also atherosclerosis related. And then cerebrovascular diseases, it's multiple different ones, but a big chunk of them happen to be atherosclerosis related. There's some blockage there that happen at the level of the brain. So as you can see, that's a huge, cause of many, many problems here in Australia. And here you can see how, as people age, the cardiovascular disease rates go up and up and up and up and up, being males having that number 1. And I wrote in this book, I'm co-author in this book, this is the textbook of lifestyle medicine, and in this book we deal with that. So, like the patient that I was telling you previously, how this patient had, all kinds of diseases, and after changing his lifestyle, he was able to, lose the weight and reverse disease. Well, I've seen the same thing with heart disease. Patients come to us with what is called angina. Angina, they feel this heaviness in the chest, and that means that those blood vessels are very, very clogged in, as I'll tell you in a second. And as they come to the lifestyle program, at the end of the 18 days, I've seen this, I talk to them. They are walking or running kilometers. Before, if they started doing some sort of, physical exercise, they start getting this, this chest pains and so forth. So they have to stop and sometimes take some medication to relieve the problem. But how can they be walking by kilometers by the end? Because the body starts healing. So that's exactly what I want you guys to experience, that type of reversal of the disease. Now notice this interesting study. In this study, they were documenting that 75% of doctors and 75% of patients with type 2 diabetes are unaware that their type 2 diabetes is potentially reversible. So if your doctor doesn't know you can reverse the problem, do you think he's going to tell you, the tips and hints how to do this, That's exactly the issue. So as we were learning in the previous lecture on Friday, we talked about epigenetics, remember? How most diseases have a genetic origin. Well, many cases of heart disease, there's a genetic factor there. If you ask the patient, they're going to tell you, oh yeah, my dad had heart disease. Yeah, my grandfather, had a heart attack and so forth. There's some family history there that runs with the problem. But as we learn, these genes, by changing our habits, we can actually make changes and we can stop many of those diseases. So, as we learn, as in the case of the Marshall Islands, by changing the habits, people started opening up the door to multiple diseases. And this is what is happening worldwide. The reason why we're seeing so much heart disease all over the world has to do with the fact that we are changing our lifestyle not for good, but our choices are actually starting to get worse and worse and worse. So, as we were talking about these statistics, happen to be something that is common all over the Western world. You can go to Germany and check them. You can go to Canada and check them. You can go to New Zealand and check them. They are very similar, those numbers, all over the Western world. And as we're going to be learning about dementia later in the week, as you can see, there's a type 4 cause of dementia, and that's vascular. There's not enough blood arriving to the brain, and that actually is a very, very common cause why people end up with Alzheimer's disease. So not only you endanger your heart, not only you endanger other parts of your body, but you can actually be endangering your brain by atherosclerosis. And this is a report in which they found out that in America, 2/3 of all the deaths in America are directly related to diet. Now, this is the interesting thing. There's people that have the same age, yet some of them, their artery looks like this. Nice, clean, flexible, and so forth. And at the same time, there's people the same age, their artery looks like that. What made the difference? Is it luck? Not necessarily, isn't it? It's the choices that we are taking what's going to determine that. And let me tell you why this is such an important thing, this heart disease. So we have a blood vessel. If we cut that blood vessel and then we expose the walls of the blood vessel, that outermost layer is what is called the endothelium. This is what gets sick in our arteries. This is what causes heart disease. And notice this principle. You are going to age at the same speed that your endothelium ages. You know, why is that? Because just think a little bit about it. Every single organ in your body is dependent on blood. You need that blood because the blood is going to bring the nutrients, the blood is going to bring the oxygen. And just like a car that is generating smoke, your cells are generating toxic products, so the blood is what's going to take that waste products away from it. Okay? So every organ is dependent in this. Now, if you start getting atherosclerosis there and things start to block, what's going to happen? There's not a good, efficient amount of nutrients. There's not a good, efficient amount of oxygen. And the organs will start to age faster than what they should. Secondary to the fact that there is no, not enough blood. So you literally age faster when you are eating the wrong types of foods. So, especially one of the worst things that you can be eating is something that is called, and this is very important, oxidized cholesterol. We're going to come back to that. This oxidized cholesterol is something that is really, really damaging to your blood vessels. So let me show you this. See, it's just like here in Australia. I noticed that here in Australia, you guys really patrol excessively the roads. I see cameras and I see police all over the place there. So in the same way, in your blood vessels, you also have policemen on the side of the blood vessels. Okay? They're just taking a look there, making sure that everything is okay, and so forth. And when oxidized cholesterol is passing by there, that stuff is so toxic, those policemen are going to go ahead and eat that oxidized cholesterol, but that stuff is so toxic, the cells are going to literally die, and that oxidized cholesterol will start accumulating there. Now, if you eat oxidized cholesterol once a year or something like that, it's not that big of a deal. But if oxidized cholesterol is something that you are eating on a regular basis, then your blood vessels are going to get so much damage that instead of being nice and smooth, the walls of your blood vessels, they're going to be, forming these peaks and valleys. You think that's good for your blood vessels? No, not necessarily. You end up, causing even little abnormal blood flows and so forth that increase the risk for, high blood pressure and these type of things. So look at this. This is the indigenous people from Mexico. How many of those indigenous people from Mexico do you see with obesity? Anyone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many? None of them. Now, there were some boats from Europe that started bringing all kinds of things that in the past they didn't have there. You add that, problems with sedentarism, ultra-processed foods, rich foods, sugars, animal products, and so forth. And sadly, if you travel to Latin America, you will see that problems with obesity are problems that are quite common. So I had an opportunity to go to Africa back in the year 2000. We went to Tanzania. We went to a very rural area of Tanzania. And it kind of opened my eyes because I started observing how our ancestors used to live. It was an area in rural Africa that didn't have running water, didn't have electricity. There were not even stores to buy food. People had to cultivate their own food. So you would see these kids, very, physically fit, running all over the place. We were teaching students there and in the schools about health and so forth. How many children with obesity you count there? Anyone? 0, And they're eating enough, These kids have enough to eat at home. Of course, there's a few exceptions here and there, alcohol in the family and stuff like that. But in general, most of these kids are eating, enough food and so forth. So they invited us to eat a typical meal. Look at what they're eating there. They're eating this not because they read the latest, health magazine somewhere there, but this is the food that is available there, which consisted of a pot of beans, some avocado, this chapatis that they made, and then a sauce they put on those beans, and some fruit. That's it, That's the food that they are used to eating. So you see these people back then, again, this is the rural area there in Tanzania, working very hard every day, planting and so forth, because if you don't work your fields, you won't get food, So they're like really hard working all the time. And in fact, you see in their homes, they have their places there, and then there's a big area that they need to use to cultivate all the things that they need to be eating. Now, you have the same genetics, and we changed the environmental type of variables, such as diet, exercise, sleep, and we end up with problems like this in America, secondary to changing the variables, the same genetics, but different environmental factors. And I have documented this. This is also something that many females, as they're going through the process of menopause, they start to share this. They say, doctor, I used to be very healthy and so forth, and as I reach the time of menopause, I'm seeing that my blood pressure is going up and my glucose starting to have problems and so forth. But it doesn't need to be so. This is exactly what we're documenting in this study, that those people, as they go through the process of menopause, they can actually start changing their lifestyle, and they can actually start controlling many of those risk factors. And in this other study, this is another one of my studies, we're documenting how people that have problems with high blood pressure, after 18 days, 93% of them, we had to either stop their medication or reduce their blood pressure medication, secondary to the fact that the blood pressure started to go down. Is that good news or bad news? Good news. And this is what we see at every program. And yes, you're able to reverse all kinds of things such as neuropathy by switching the diet. This is another one of the studies of Weimar. So the problem is that when we're eating these foods rich in trans fats, that also hurts our blood vessels. When we eat this type of fats, you're hurting your blood vessels every time you eat them. And there's not only your risk of heart disease increases, your risk of Alzheimer's also increases, secondary to the fact that they are clogging in, their arteries. So this is the problem. Look at this. The problem is, as we were learning today, heart disease starts at very young age. At the age of 10, at the age of 20, the young people already have the beginnings of that heart disease. And the problem is that you can be in your 40s, your 60s, and having significant amount of atherosclerosis in your artery. But the problem is that you don't have symptoms. So you can have significant heart disease and you don't know this. So when the symptoms start, is because you have between 70 and 80% of blockage to your artery. That's when the symptoms start. And when the symptoms starts, the heart disease, the heart attack, and the stroke are just around the corner. And that's why you cannot say, well, the day that I start having chest pain, start making the changes, it may be too late. You need to start the changes before that if you want to stop this process. And we know that there's definitely a relationship between your level of cholesterol and your risk of heart disease, no question about it. So, cholesterol is only found in foods that come from animals. Cholesterol is not found in vegetable products. So watch out for that. Top 10 foods to avoid if you want to avoid this heart disease. So we have number 1, processed foods. Number 2, processed meats. Number 3, red meat. Chicken, which happens to be the main source of cholesterol in the Western world. By some reason, some people think that chickens grow on trees. They don't. They're not vegetables. Butter and margarine, fried foods and fast foods, cheese, pastries and sweets, sugary drinks, and alcohol, because it happens to be something that is toxic to your blood vessels. So, let me show you this very eye-opening study. This study was done by Dr. Ornish, which happens to be one of the cardiologists of Bill Clinton. Okay, so you know which kind of cardiologist this is, a very important cardiologist. So, they did this very interesting study. They had people that were candidates to open heart surgery, okay? So, they randomized these people and made 2 groups. One group followed the counsel that patients with high cholesterol get by the average physician. If you have high cholesterol, most probably they're going to tell you something like this. They're going to say, no red meat, but you can eat white meat. Have you heard that? You cannot eat full-fat dairy, but you can eat low-fat dairy. Have you heard that counsel? Okay. These people were following that counsel very, very carefully. They were being monitored and everything, so nobody was cheating, and so forth. If you follow that counsel, this is what's going to happen to you. Only 6% of the people following that counsel actually get better. In fact, 79% of the people following that type of eating, the heart disease will continue to get worse and worse and worse. Is this a good plan? Not necessarily, unless you're a cardiologist and you put in procedures and you make money out of them. It's a really good plan. You make good money with so many diseased people. And look at what happened here. So they started checking the arteries of these people, and they found out that after 3 years, 41% of them had progression of their heart disease. After 5 years, 65% of them had progression of heart disease. After 7 years, 77% of them had progression of the heart disease. And after 10 years, 85% of the people continue to have their heart disease advance more and more and more. So unfortunately, if what we want is to defeat this problem, this plan is not going to work. And I've seen it many times, personally as a physician. So what they did, they divided the group into two. So one was following, the standard, counsel that they give to people with high cholesterol. The second group, and this is very important, was following this diet, which consisted of 10% of fat and 5 or less milligrams of cholesterol a day. How many? Remember that number, 5 or less milligrams of cholesterol a day. If you can do that, this is what's going to happen to your blood vessels. Look at this. 82% of the people following this plan, there is literal reversal of the heart disease. The arteries are healing. Is that good or bad? Fantastic, isn't it? See, because even things like erectile dysfunction, the number one cause of that happens to be atherosclerosis. The blood vessels that are going to the male organ are getting clogged in. You don't have enough blood there, and that's why the problem. In fact, a wise physician knows that when you diagnose somebody of that, the heart attack is coming in 5-7 years after that. Because as the blood vessels there are getting clogged up, this is happening all over your body, including the arteries of your heart. Then 14%, at least they stopped advancing, which is good news, that this thing doesn't continue anything more. And only 4% of them had progression. And the issue with these people is that their issue was beyond the diet and exercise and so forth. These people had a problem, for example, emotional. People that have unforgiveness in their heart and so forth, that causes heart disease. You need to learn to forgive, people that are, that are like really angry and so forth, that stuff is not good for your arteries. You need to learn to deal with that in a healthy way. So, as you can see, there was fantastic healing that took place. So what were they doing? They were following that, 5 milligrams of cholesterol or less a day. So let's go and see how much cholesterol different foods have. So we can figure out our goal, which is 5 or less. You don't necessarily need to eat the 5. In fact, if you can even have less, it's even better. So fruits don't have cholesterol. Grains don't have cholesterol. Nuts, no cholesterol. Vegetables, no cholesterol. Okay? Let's start seeing things that have cholesterol. So we have non-fat milk, 4 milligrams of cholesterol. 2% milk, this one has 18 milligrams of cholesterol. That's above the 5. Whole milk has 33 milligrams of cholesterol. Now, egg white, 0. Okay, so that's the only animal food that doesn't have cholesterol, but raises cholesterol, by the way. Mayonnaise, 8 milligrams of cholesterol. Ice cream, 29 milligrams of cholesterol. Butter, 31 milligrams of cholesterol. 1 egg, how much? You're eating the cholesterol for the whole week, or the whole month, in just one sitting down. See, Harvard University has a very interesting study that was showing eating eggs equivalent as smoking, at how much damage to the arteries happen when you eat this. Tuna, is that below 5 or after, more than 5? More than 5, 26. Clams, 57. Crab, 64. And then here is the myth of the myths. So you have 73 grams of cholesterol, chicken breast with no skin, pork, 76. Is there much difference? No, there's virtually not much difference. In fact, beef is 80, and chicken breast with the skin even has more cholesterol than this. See, I get patients that come to me frustrated. They say, "Doctor, I am eating so much chicken to lower my cholesterol. I'm even getting feathers on my leg because I eat so much chicken. And I don't understand why my cholesterol doesn't go down." I'm sorry, it's not going to go down. It will not go down because of the excess cholesterol that you are eating. Oysters, 84. Sardines, 120. Shrimp, 165. And all the internal organs of the body, they're loaded with cholesterol. Any organ that has a lot of nervous tissue has a lot of cholesterol. So beef kidneys, 329. Beef liver, 410. Caviar, 500. And the food with the highest amount of cholesterol happens to be the brains of the cow. 1,697. In Mexico, they eat the beef brain taco. I tell my friends, don't eat this stuff. You're going to acquire the intelligence of the cow from eating this. Be careful with that. So even the American Heart Association, this is what they're promoting. Look, this is what they are trying to teach people. Look at that. Lower that LDL, which is, that harmful cholesterol. If you have type 2 diabetes, put that under control. Eat your whole food, plant-based diet. Have your weight under control. Do your exercise. Stop smoking. And have your blood pressure under control. So that's basically, what we are promoting here. Did you know that 80% of cardiac events can be prevented through education and lifestyle changes? I mean, this is very, very good news because we can avoid this. So, in closing, look at, this is what we were showing, how this blood vessel of the heart, you can see it's nice and thick on the upper part. And then on the left side, you can see how it becomes suddenly thin. It's because on the left side and also a little bit on the right side, there's a plaque of atherosclerosis, which is causing that blood vessel to close. And look at on the right side, it's the same blood vessel. What were they doing? There it is in the article, the scientific paper. It says there, 32 months on a plant-based diet without cholesterol-lowering medication, showing profound improvement. Here's another example. You can see in that arrow is how it becomes narrow. That's because of atherosclerosis, 60 months following that plant-based diet. This other one, very clear. It's nice and thick. And then when the arrow is, becomes thin there. Because of the atherosclerosis, 60 months later, you can see the reversal. This one is so blocked, it's actually disappearing, the blood vessel, secondary to how severe that atherosclerosis is. 60 months later, that artery heals. So something very interesting happened in Norway. I speak Norwegian because I used to live in Norway. And in Norway, then the Germans were very interested in conquering Norway during the Second World War because of the farms. So Norwegians usually eat a lot of animal products. But when the Nazis conquered Norway, they took away all their animal products so they could feed their armies. So bye-bye, cows, chickens, dogs, geese, pork, and everything else. So what did people eat if they didn't have animals? What the ground was giving them. And look at what happened there. The amount of heart attacks and strokes, notice the date there, 1940s, started to decrease dramatically in the whole country until around 1945. Any history experts here? What happened in 1945? War was over, and the chickens came back, and the pork came back, and the beef came back, and so forth, and heart disease and stroke started going up again. To the point that back in the 1970s, Norway, had one of the highest amounts of heart disease in the whole world, secondary to the change in diet. Now, as I told you, the problem is oxidized cholesterol. How do you get oxidized cholesterol? Any animal food that is exposed to air. That's going to cause oxidation. So what they did in this study, they started identifying the foods with the highest amount of oxidized cholesterol. Here's the list. Number 1, custard mixes. What's the custard mix? What are the ingredients? Milk, eggs, and sugar. Sugar and milk causes tremendous oxidation, which sadly is the breakfast of many people, isn't it? Cereal that has sugar and milk, that's a wrong type of combination. By the way, interesting study. What has more cholesterol? The milk of human mothers, or the milk of cows? The milk of humans actually have more cholesterol. But it doesn't cause any harm on the baby because it's never oxidized. How does the baby take that milk? Straight out of the breast, no time for oxidation whatsoever. Perfect food for those babies. So, if you want to drink cow's milk without oxidation, what do you need to do? You need to hang from there, Now, because of hygiene may not necessarily be the best thing to do. Second thing, pancake mixes. Why is it so oxidative, these pancake mixes? Well, what's the number 1 ingredient? Powder egg. So what are you doing? Making the egg, making it into small little pieces, exposing it to the air, so every single one of those pieces has that. In milk, they oxidize it further. I don't know if you ever seen in the old days how they used to milk the cow, and then the milk used to separate. For those people that used to live in farms, you saw this. How come milk doesn't separate anymore? because we think we're very smart. So we take the milk and we pass it through a very small hole, and that causes a mixture of both parts, and that's why our milk doesn't separate anymore. But what are we just doing? Now, every single drop, we are exposing it to the air, oxidizing that much further. Next one, Parmesan cheese. And last one, lard. These are the most oxidative foods around. These are the type of foods that are going to be harming your blood vessels. So as you can see, there is something that we can do to stop this heart disease. I'm very glad that you now have this information so that we can shoot for that 5 milligrams or less a day so we can defeat this heart disease. So we'll take a little break of 10 minutes and we'll come back for the second part of tonight's seminar. Thank you very much.